all watch out for as the months unfold. So in business, we believe in working to critical mass, optimizing the benefits that we have. My suggestion is that we could do much more. We could move much more quickly to make things work better and more cheaply and have more money available to spend if we amalgamated things. And that, for some people, is absolutely unthinkable. But I put it to you, do people really want to die in the trenches defending the right not to include Bristol in their address? Or would rather the achievement of a better place for our children and our grandchildren more usefully exercise our passions and energies? We could save a lot of money.
Thank you. So there we have it, an idea that could save millions, he says, without apparently impacting on us, the general public. Too good to be true, I wonder? Let's hear what you have to think about it. First of all, I want to speak to Councillor Nigel Ashton, who's the Conservative leader of North Somerset Council. Your council should be scrapped.
That's according to John Savage, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. John seems to think that if you amalgamate councils together, you get a better service. From my experience, if you amalgamate administrations into even bigger administrations, you not only get even more waste, but you get further from the frontline troops who can really make the difference. And that's the problem. That's the difference I have with John.
OK. Anyone else want to speak on this? Yes, gentleman in front of me, caught my eye.
You're talking about Avon County Council, aren't you? That was abolished, tragically, 20 years ago. Now, my background's teaching. I can absolutely assure everybody here that the education service was far, far better under Avon County Council than it is under its four constituent parts. So in that terms, you agree with you, the abolition of Avon was absolutely tragic.
It's not Avon, is it, David? It's more than that, because
you'd call it something else, would you?
Yes, but Avon had particular responsibilities. The unitaries, sadly for them, have a much broader spread. So it isn't exactly Avon, but it's something like that with more.
Kerry McCarthy, Labour MP for Bristol East. Can reorganisation help reduce the pain, or are you fearful for council services?
I certainly think that there's a lot to be gained from working across the four local authorities. And although John mentioned the fact that we've got the joint local transport plan, I think if we could move to an integrated transport authority, for example, we would get an awful lot more done in terms of advancing the transport agenda. So I think there are political difficulties in trying to recreate either Avon or Avon Plus, but I certainly think that the more we can do to encourage joint working, the better.
OK. Councillor John Godwin is here. Now, he's the Conservative Cabinet member for South Gloucestershire. Can you tell us what cuts you're planning and how they will affect local families?
Yes, we started a transformation agenda some 2 years ago of reforming all our services to look and see if we could improve the way we work. And we have a target of a saving of £12 million over 2.5 years, and we're well on the way to that. And I think that whilst we're all talking about a larger authority, and I have some sympathy with what John says, there's an awful lot that our individual councils can do right now to modernise the way they deliver services in the way that South Gloucestershire is, and that would help enormously.
We're talking about making economies of scale. I mean, why do you pay your chief executive £180,000 a year? I didn't personally appoint the chief executive. How much would you have paid?
But I don't know. I would have to do a comparison of other authorities,
the
size of authorities.
Why wouldn't you just pay what you thought was worth, he was worth, or she was worth?
Those that made that appointment thought that that was what the chief executive was worth. I'm not going to comment on that.
All right. I mean, when you allocate, if you count up chief exec pay in the West Country, it comes to the best part of £1 million a year. Does anyone want to defend chief executive pay? Has anyone got any strong opinions about it? You haven't? Oh, that's good. Ross, they'll be very pleased. Ross Henley is a Lib Dem county councillor. Now, your council in Somerset has announced huge cuts this last week, 1 in 4 staff to go. How can you justify that?
I can't. I'm an opposition county councillor.
I believe... What party do you belong to?
I'm a Liberal Democrat county councillor.
And the ruling party is?
It's Conservative.
So you're not in coalition?
Absolutely not. No. Can I say there is no coalition? Absolutely not. Locally, the Liberal Democrats councillors in Somerset feel that the statement made by Councillor Maddock on Friday was an utter disgrace. How is Somerset County Council going to function with potentially losing 1,500 of its 6,500 staff? Councillor Maddock and his Conservative administration has cut funding in the past to police community support officers, is now closing libraries. He is running Somerset County Council into the ground. We are becoming a byword for a joke in county council and local government terms. It is an utter disgrace.
He's also freezing the council tax.
But what effect? What effect? He is selling off a number of our county farms. Young farmers, actually their way into the farming industry is by way of county farms. That could be potentially taken away from them by disposing of our county farms.
Matthew Heal, I think, is here. Matthew, you are a farmer, aren't you? Just you're right here at the front. Yeah, so how's it personally affecting you?
Personally, it's affecting me because it's taking our way of the business taken away from us. We've just built our herds up to where we are at the moment over the last 7 years, and we want to expand the business, and they're taking that away from us by making us shut shop in effect.
Yeah, Mr. Maddock was going to come tonight actually. He couldn't make it sadly, so he can't defend himself. But this is a Tory-run council, and nationally the Tories are in coalition with the Lib Dems. This is extraordinary. I think we have the Lib Dem MP here, don't we, Tessa Munt? Did you make this absolutely clear when you were campaigning in Wells that you were going to support this agenda of cuts?
I think we all recognise cuts were going to be necessary. All three parties recognised cuts were going to be necessary, but I would absolutely defend people like Matthew here, the right to actually run his farm, and that we've got to look to the future and make absolutely certain that we provide food for ourselves. It doesn't even make, it's not even a sound economic case for selling off the county farms.
But the broader issue, address the broader issue.
No, well, the broader issue is, I'm sorry, I agree with Councillor Henley, you know, on the ground here. Being in coalition nationally doesn't mean you have to subscribe to lunacy at local level. And you know,
how would you suggest then the county council save the money, or do they not need to? Are these spending cuts actually as necessary as you said?
Sure, absolutely. But actually what Ken Maddock has done is he's made an announcement of cuts now. We're actually waiting, aren't we, for the consultation. And I'm aware that there have been something like, I don't know, 40, 50,000 suggestions from people on how money might be saved.
Let's just take some points of view. Gentleman there in the white shirt with the glasses. Yes, just there. Yeah?
Well, I think the first point to be made is not everybody agrees that cuts are necessary in public spending. I think we should remind ourselves that the economic crisis in this country wasn't caused by public spending, which is an investment, not a debt. It was caused by the greed and the incompetence of the bankers.
I suspect we've been hearing that point a lot. Let's go to the gentleman in the middle with his hand up. Yes, please.
I'm the Vice Chairman of the Filton Council, and I know only too well what Mr. John Godwin's been saying down here about savings have got to be made. We've made mistakes in the past, or our previous administration has, and we're having to clear them up now. But there's one thing about it, is I can well imagine, I can well see why we're in this particular state at the moment with regard to our economy. Extravagances in the past have been gone, we cannot afford them, and the people of Filton have told us directly what they think about it.
Thank you. John Savage, have you changed your mind at all after listening to the debate?
Not at all. We have to get into the 21st century and think laterally. There's a lot to be done. It's not about saving money as much as using it better, and we need to do it. We need to get professional about it.
John Savage, thank you. Please sit down. Our next provocateur is Margaret Heffernan. Margaret is a successful businesswoman who's made millions from software and media enterprises. She's an American, but now lives in Somerset and has appeared on TV's Secret Millionaire programme. She was seen handing out money to community groups in Nottingham when she revealed her true identity. Now she gives motivation talks, especially to women. Well, tonight she's motivating us, and she's some ideas about how to save taxpayers some cash. So for the woman who gave money away, it's payback time. Margaret Heffernan, please take your place at our podium.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I'd like to propose that we cull the quangos. There are too many of them, they're too wasteful, they're unelected, they're unaffordable private fiefdoms. We have over 1,100 of these quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organizations. They employ 700,000 people, which means they're bigger than the army. I'm talking about things like the Southwest Regional Development Organisation, the spectacularly badly managed UK Film Council, even, for heaven's sakes, the Potato Council. In 2007, Quango spent £64 billion. That's £2,500 per household, according to the Taxpayer Alliance. As an entrepreneur, I reserve most of my irritation for BusinessLink, the advice service for businesses and new businesses. For years, it's been a cozy departure lounge for middling executives handing out old-fashioned advice to aspiring entrepreneurs. It costs £200 million a year. And even though it has 1,600 advisors, many of them have told me they think the money would be better spent just giving it directly to aspiring businesses. But even though the government has proposed axing this, the fact is that it wants to keep an online service costing £35 million a year for 3 years. That's nearly £100 million for a website. Why do we need a website? The internet is chock-a-block with fantastic advice and tremendous resources for any aspiring entrepreneur. There's never been a better resource for entrepreneur. There are more networks, there are more peer mentoring organizations than ever. And the Southwest, which is full of outstanding universities, including, to name but one, the University of Bath, regularly offer courses, workshops, masterclasses for aspiring businesses. The best person to give advice to an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur, not a Whitehall mandarin who's never taken a risk in his life. Thank goodness, however, the whistle's been blown not just on BusinessLink, but on its parent organization, which is the Regional Development Organization. In theory, the Southwest RDA, which costs us £120 million a year, is supposed to be bringing business into the Southwest. And it kind of does, but at the cost of £60,000 per job created. That's twice the national average salary. The new government's talking about replacing RDAs with something called a local enterprise partnership, an LEP. What is an LEP? Well, it's probably a Quango light. So while I'm absolutely thrilled the government's had the nerve to axe BusinessLink and the RDAs, I'm a little anxious about the baby Quangos that may spring up in their wake. Thank you.
Margaret, why don't you say what you really think?
Do you really want to hear it?
Another provocative view. We have been expecting BusinessLink here tonight, but they've not come. So we'll see if anyone else wants to defend.
It is real. I can't tell you how many people who work for BusinessLink have told me privately that there are better ways to do this.
All right. Well, let's just examine that and just take a few points of view. First of all, we'll go back to you, John Savage. How many Quangos do you sit on?
Well, a lot of them have been cut already. So, you know, the Learning and Skills Council was cut. They're not all bad, unfortunately. They're not all bad.
Are you on BusinessLink as well?
I'm a director of BusinessLink, yeah.
Right. So, would you like to do the honours and defend it? I mean, is it this sort of place for retired execs?
It would be invidious. It doesn't pay me anything. It tries to do a job. It's probably got to the end of its course.
So you'd support it going?
Any other thoughts on? Any other thoughts on? Yes, gentleman there in the T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think there is a role for government with very difficult sites like the Moreland site near Glastonbury Street, where the site isn't commercially viable. It's polluted with heavy metals and it's polluted with what do they call it? The sheep disease. Yeah. And they started that project to clear it up and unfortunately finished it. So I accept your arguments on entrepreneurs, but where does the pump priming come from to recover sites that the private sector would not be interested in?
All right. Claire Perry, yeah, in the middle, you agree?
I think it's incredibly important we have the discussion about business. I mean, there are three things that the government needs to do to stimulate business, and we all know that the way we're going to employ people is by having private sector, by having business growth, and it's to basically provide a low corporate tax rate, to get the regulation cut down so businesses can actually function, and to provide the infrastructure backbone, whether it's roads or railways or broadband, that mean that businesses can flourish. And I would basically submit that the last government failed on all three of those points, and I think you're absolutely right. We don't need Whitehall mandarins sitting signalling where the money is. We need to prime the pump, let businesses flourish, and get off their backs and out of the way.
Thank you. Gentleman on my far right, just behind me. Yes, that's you, please, sir.
Yeah, I chair the African and Caribbean Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise, and I totally agree with what Margaret is saying in terms of the service provided by Business Link. We get people coming to us all the time asking for advice. We are not funded by any government agency. This is just done through our members. These are businesses. For free. So in a sense, people come to us and say, look, we've been to Business Link. They can't help us. They can't give us any advice. So they've come to us. And in the last year that the Chamber of Commerce has been in operation, we've helped to set up nearly 100 businesses. We've got nearly 500 businesses just in the west of England.
And how much taxpayers' money do you
We don't get any money from anybody at all. This is all self-funded through the contributions and the subscription by the members themselves.
Thank you.
And to be fair, I've heard stories like that all over the country.
Phil Gibby, you're the South West Director of the Arts Council. Where do you get your funding from?
Our funding comes from the Treasury, but also it's from the lottery as well. I have some sympathy with what Margaret says. I think Quangos have quite a lot to do in terms of slimming down their admin costs. The Arts Council, for example, spends just 6 pence in the pound on its admin, which means the other 94% goes straight to arts organisations. I think that's quite a good deal. Yes, we are.
So what are you doing to slim down your costs?
Well, we've cut our admin costs as we've outlined there, but I think there's another role as well for Quangos to play, which is at a time when public spending is going to become very much harder, we have to work with arts organisations to ensure that they're leaner and fitter for purpose as well. So helping them find private sector support, for example, is a role that we can usefully play.
And what about the future, do you think, with less funding for the arts? Is that something that worries you? Will it impact on families?
I think it's tough. The arts have an instrumental role to play in society. They can help drive economic growth. If you look at Bristol's creative industry community, where would they be without organisations like Watershed? But that said, we understand the need for public sector spending cuts, and we will take our share as well.
Thank you. Alistair Handyside is from South West Tourism. Alistair, good evening. You're a Quango too, aren't you?
We're an arm's length funded body from the RDA, so with the RDA's demise...
So the RDA is a Quango, and you're a Quango.
Yeah, but the RDA... Well, I mean, you could say that, but the RDA set a set of rules that meant that we became an entirely publicly funded body, so we have no commercial activity. So what we will be looking for is a small transitional thing that enabled us to come back to being the commercial body that South West Tourism was prior to the RDA wanting...
So will you continue to exist?
No, the South West Tourism will be closed down in March next year, but we will see.
And what effects do you think that will have on tourism? Your role is presumably to get tourists here to the South West.
Yes, it's one of the most important industries in our region, so we will have to find a way of coming up with a mixture of public and private.
Do you know how much you bring in?
Many hundreds of millions, and the funding from the RDA was 1.2 million, so it's not a huge...
Margaret, is that an example of a Quango that actually brought us a bit of profit?
I mean, I do think there are some great Quangos. I'd say the Arts Council. I'd also say things like the Food Standards Agency, you know, which do really vital jobs. With all due respect, I think there are lots of people who will come to the Southwest without a Quango to encourage them. And it's quite interesting. In some parts of the Southwest, tourism's actually been falling. So you have to ask, you know, how effective that money has been.
Thank you. Let's take another point. Gentleman with his hand up right at the back. That's it, please.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a red herring, really. I don't think, if you look at how we got into the recession, into the mess, many people would say that the problem was too much state intervention and regulation of business. I think there was too little. Yeah. Last year, £123 billion worth of unpaid tax due to tax loopholes. I mean, how many jobs, public services, you know, hospitals, schools could be saved if that was collected?
We're coming on to that. Thank you very much indeed. We'll just...
If I could just respond to that, I would say, actually, what's really interesting is that the people who are crushed by legislation are the small businesses that have tons of it, and the big businesses somehow get away with murder, sometimes quite literally.
Margaret Heffernan, thank you. I'm sorry you didn't bring some of your millions tonight to give away to us. Would you please leave the stage? Thank you. Our final speaker tonight is Mark Dampier, a financial expert who knows all about counting the pennies. He works for the Bristol investment company Hargreaves Lansdown, the business that started in a bedroom and is now a financial giant. Its two founders have become extremely wealthy men. One of them, of course, has decided to spend his cash on Bristol City Football Club. The firm has made millionaires out of more than 20 of its staff and is a leading advisor on pensions. Mark Dampier is a man who understands money, but tonight he has some controversial ideas of what we can't afford. Mark Dampier, please take your place at the podium.
Good evening. It was said when Margaret Thatcher was in power that she was handed a note by a civil servant, and on it was the public sector pensions bill. And she looked at it and gave it back and said, "Leave it for another government." Well, that was about 30 years ago, and I'm afraid my unpopular measure is simply that we should stop public pensions now. They are totally unsustainable. They are a £1 trillion bill. Bearing in mind that the national debt in 5 years' time will be £1.5 trillion. The NHS pension bill is over £5 billion. It's more than 10% of its budget. But the bad joke is, of course, there's no actual pension fund. Demographics are going to play a very big part over the next few years. The baby boomers are retiring, and there's not enough people to be paying these pensions in the future. So for my children and children's children, I think we have a problem and we need to do something about it and address it now. It's spectacularly unfair as well to those who don't have a public sector pension. A nurse earning £25,000 a year pays 6.5%. Taxpayers chip in another 14% to that. That's according to government figures. In fact, it's over double that. In the private sector, an employer might pay a contribution of 6%. And you might, as an employee, pay something, but nothing in the largesse of a public sector pension. Now, in an ideal world, everyone should have final salary schemes. They're marvellous, but they're also open-ended liabilities. The Royal Mail has a £10 billion pension deficit, so effectively we have a pension fund now running our letters. And finally, there's one sector that should start this, and it's the MPs, it's Parliament. They have the most wonderful gold-plated pension fund. There's a surprise, they actually voted for it, didn't they? The average tenure of a MP is 13 years, and in that time they can accumulate a pension fund of £21,000. That is a pension per year. Now, on the private sector, you would have to get an accumulated sum of £555,000 to get that same amount. Or put another way, someone aged 30 would have to pay £700 a month for the next 35 years to get that size of pension. I call that unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you. Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, you're a Conservative MP for the Cotswolds. Can the public afford your pension and your colleagues' pensions?
Well, the MP's pensions are going to be reformed radically.
But do you accept that you're living in a different world to people in the private sector at the moment?
I do accept that nobody or very few people in the private sector now get a final salary pension scheme similar to those, and there are not only MPs, there are many others in the public sector that get similar pensions, and the whole public sector pensions have to be reformed. Your box this evening didn't actually give a figure for the amount of money that we spend on unfunded pensions, but it's quite considerable. We cannot go on paying out pensions to public sector workers without them being properly funded in the future.
And you'll accept some of the pain too, all right?
We are taking pain, we will take a lot more pain.
Mark Dampier, nurses, hospital receptionists, doctors, surgeons, they didn't do anything to cause this credit crunch. It was the private sector, capitalism, the people that you work for. Why should they take the pain?
I think I'd be saying this without it. It makes no difference. It's £1 trillion liability. It makes no difference. The bankers cause, I'm not here to sympathise with the bankers at all. They cause major problems, but you have to say, so did the politicians and so did the regulators. We all pay, by the way, for our regulators. What were they doing over the last few years?
Let's take some views. People who haven't said anything so far, perhaps the lady in the front here, yes. Hello.
I think it's astonishing that someone who's allegedly a financial expert shows such ignorance about public finance. If you take away public sector pensions, you move the cost to the welfare bill without the individuals having to make the contributions to their pension scheme that they make now. The average pension in local government is less than £4,000 a year, and it's
in the
absolutely,
private sector, it's £2,000.
I'm sorry, I am speaking, and it's absolutely appalling for somebody who represents some of the wealthiest people in this region to attack some of the poorest people in this region.
Deborah Nicholson from the Royal College of Nursing. Deborah.
Hello. The NHS is still a predominantly female profession, and the average pension in the NHS is between £4,000 and £5,000 a year. And it's all very well to say, oh, well, the public sector. When the public sector were private sector were doing very well, thank you very much, they used to mock us and say, oh, you poor old NHS people. And now the tables have turned, it seems that we're the ones that are being
Thank you.
Sort of laid into.
Thank you. Lady in the front here with the glasses.
Very personal opinion. My parents were always in the public sector, and they used to say, yes, we get lower wages now, but we will get a good pension in the future. That's gone out of balance. The public sector get good wages now and can look forward to good pensions in the future.
Which public sector's that gets good wages?
John Drake. John Drake is here. You're a fireman. John, identify yourself.
Yeah,
You're a firefighter, yes.
Firefighter.
What would you like to say to our financial expert?
Well, I find it absolutely incredible that here we are, a financial expert lecturing the public sector, given that it was the financial experts that got us into this mess in the first place. Well, I think the point's already been made about the average public sector pension. Now, as a firefighter, I pay 11% of my salary into my pension scheme, and every other firefighter does too. And we start that on the day one of our service. So for 30 plus years, we will pay in 11% of our salary. And at a given point in time, we will get certain benefits. And I'll tell you what, I've upheld, and other firefighters have upheld their end of the bargain. We have paid in 11% of our salary over 30 years. At times when we couldn't afford it either, but we continued doing that. And now it's time for the government to honour their side and to pay us the benefits that we've accrued over the last 30 years.
Do you want to answer him?
I'm not actually suggesting you shouldn't get your pension now, not after that amount of time, nor am I suggesting we should stop contributions. I'm just suggesting that we should all go to private pensions, which is what all the other people have to do. And on private pensions, by the way, the average is about £2,000 a year, because actually people don't contribute enough money. And part of the problem is the civil service all have final salary schemes, and none of them have a clue of what's going on in the private pension schemes. They are appalling.
But
and
the
have been for
private
years.
pensions aren't delivering, that you manage, aren't delivering the money, are they?
No, it's people don't pay enough money into them. That's the trouble.
John Drake, let's come back to you very quickly. Firefighters, I think, and police officers too, can retire after 30 years, is that right?
30 years service, yes.
Yeah,
but
so
I mean,
you could retire at 50?
That was on the old system, but our scheme was reformed in 2006, and now we're going to have firefighters going to have to work until they're 60 at least.
But at the moment you can retire at 50.
The ones on the existing pension
So
scheme.
if you live to 90, you've got 40 years on what, half pay?
But it's a two-thirds final salary pension scheme, yes.
Jen, you think that's affordable?
I mean, you just said if you live to 90, there's not many firefighters retired that live to the age of 90, given the job that they do during their working lives.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take some more points. A gentleman down here in the green shirt.
We're talking about cuts, but you haven't mentioned any cuts to the sort of military spending. We don't need Trident, we don't need expensive wars. This money, instead of being paid on destruction, could be spent on our welfare, and that's more important than messing up other parts of the globe.
Thank you. We'll come to that later on. Anyone who hasn't spoken? Yes, gentleman, almost at the back. That's it. Yeah, you.
Yeah, hi. I work for the NHS, and without that pension, which I've been paying in for nearly 13 years, I can't afford to go on a private pension. If it suddenly stopped, I would be crippled. I'm the money earner for my family, and I would pay in, it comes out my salary each month to go into the pension pot. But if it suddenly stopped, I would be crippled. I would have nothing to when I retire.
Okay, just this young man actually here in the 5th row.
Does Mr. Dampier not accept that millions of public sector workers have spent their entire working lives taking lower salaries
than the private sector, safe in the knowledge that they would get their public sector pension. These people are not just toxic assets you can cut off.
It's your generation. I wasn't suggesting that. You completely misunderstood what I said as well. I'm actually suggesting that we stop them now. I'm saying the accrued benefits are fine. They can carry on. But we need to do something now. It's no good saying all these things. They need some action here. And can I just say one other thing on the pension? If you've got no pension pot, if I was you in the public sector, I'd be worried. There's no money. And your money is based on a politician's promise.
Have you heard anything that's changed your mind?
No, I think it's a really tough subject. I can understand people being very frustrated and annoyed about it, but it's still got to be addressed.
Mark Dampier, thank you. Please leave the stage.
Thank you.
Well, we live in a welfare state. It's taken generations to create, but do we take it for granted? And what happens to the fabric of our lives if part of it is chipped away? Don't forget the £8,000 that Dave is guarding. How much will disappear and what effect will it have on you? A chance, I think, to have a more general discussion about some of the issues which are affecting us in welfare and health and so on. First of all, Tim Brain is the former Chief Constable of Gloucestershire. He was in charge during those awful floods. If there's cuts in the police budget, how is it going to affect Chief Constables?
The debate this evening has been very interesting, but I don't think any of your speakers from the podium have actually got close to the scale of the issue. The government is talking 25% over 4 years. That's an extraordinarily fast time. That is effectively, in any public sector organisation you're thinking about, taking away most of the growth of the last 10 to 12 years in less than half that time. So there's going to be an extraordinarily rapid deflating of the public sector bag, whatever you're talking about, education, health, welfare, indeed the police and fire services. Massive cutbacks very quickly. A lot of people leaving school, higher education now, hoping for jobs in the police service, fire service, won't have them. So what Chief Constables are going to have to do, and it's going to be Chief Constables, it's by and large not going to be elected representatives, it's going to be the real leaders of the service, who are going to have to see the people through that very, very difficult time.
So you're talking massive cuts to police staff, police officers?
Well, a quarter. Now, I mean, what we've been talking about up until now is, if I liken this to your personal hygiene regime, it's talking about shaving. What we're talking about is losing an arm and a leg. It's a very, very big deal indeed.
Peter Heffer, who's the chair of the Avon and Somerset Police Authority, have we got that sort of money to save without serious consequences?
I never thought I'd hear myself say I agree with Tim Brain, but he's obviously right. These are very serious cuts. Certainly in the police service, people expect law and order to be maintained. There's lots of nonsense talked about officers sitting around in offices. Clearly there are efficiencies that can be improved, but it will be a very serious challenge to keep the service running, and Tim's right.
But there's less crime.
There is less crime, yes, that's because we've been resourcing law and order.
Do we need as many police officers then?
Cut them away and see what you get.
What are your thoughts? What will we get?
We're not looking to cut away. I mean, you can't make a police officer redundant, which is one of the issues that we're clearly going to have to face at the moment. But my fear is that there will be more and more disorder as these cuts. There will be people who are not receiving the benefits that they think they deserve, and it will be very difficult to keep police running.
Thank you. Claire Perry, you're the Conservative MP for Devizes. I've heard people talking about you as a future Chancellor of the Exchequer. I mean, it's early days, but there we are. You heard it here first. Are these cuts realistic?
Well, I think it's fantastic to actually have this debate and have this level of kind of creativity about solutions.
Not so fantastic to have the cuts,
well, a couple of things. I mean, we're talking about taking public spending as a % of national income back to where it was in 2003. And last time, and I remember 2003, and I don't remember huge lines in bread kitchens and people running amok on the streets. I think we have to get this into perspective. And the other perspective we need to get is, yes, the credit crunch and the greedy bankers created a huge financial shock to the British economy, but the economy was struggling mightily at that point. We have been borrowing more. We have been spending more than we raise in taxes since 2001, and that gap has got bigger and bigger and bigger. So what do? Do you put taxes up more? We have driven away, as Margaret said, a lot of our
Just a point that's come up a couple of times here. When you talk about the state, you're talking about defending the country, you're talking about looking after the vulnerable, the kids, the old people, the sick.
Why do you want to cut it so badly?
Well, because this is an enormous crisis. I mean, we sit here pretending that we can carry on as business as usual. We can't. We were about to lose our AAA credit rating. That sounds like arcane banker talk. That means the cost of borrowing goes up in perpetuity. We are now seeing that that is actually not going to happen. This is a crisis that we have to deal with, and what we want is the sort of creative ideas, the permission to think these big ideas that will actually save money. The gentleman up here, who I've heard from a couple of times, who's made very eloquent points, we are asking him to pay off our profligate behaviour, and I don't think that's progressive.
He doesn't seem to mind. Do you mind?
I don't think that's sensible. Well, I submit perhaps he's not paying taxes yet.
I haven't been profligate. Have you been profligate? I haven't been. Who here has been profligate? Hands up if you've been profligate over the past 5 years.
And the public sector have been profligate.
Thank you. What should be saved? We've talked about what could be cut. What should be saved, do you think? What should be saved? Perhaps the lady here. I think your poster gives you away. Save our libraries. Yes, what would you like to say?
Well, the reason I want libraries to be saved is that they are the backbone of a civilised society. What differentiates us from countries that don't enjoy it.
What about people who don't use libraries? They still have to be paid for.
They do use libraries. In fact, they're more popular than football games. More people enter public libraries than go to football games.
Pat Robinson from Age UK, is that right? What are your fears about these cuts?
Anything that they do now is going to make it much worse for elderly people. They've already cut down to the bone the services for sheltered housing and the very sheltered housing, and anything they cut now is going to make it far, far worse for older people in the community, of which there's an increasing number.
Tim Brain seemed to say that we haven't really understood the scale of what we're talking about. Cuts of 20 and 25%. Dave Harvey, let's just have a quick word with you. You've done some sums of all of our provocateurs. Which scheme would save the most?
The numbers actually are quite simple. Let's have a look at our box, shall we? John Savage's reinvention of Avon, a new Bristol city-state. Well, it might save possibly 25 million, that sort of order. It sounds like a lot, but remember, £8,000 in my box. John's scheme is probably of the order of £2 out of this box. Margaret Heffernan trained her fire on Business Link, didn't she? 200 million nationwide. That's £1 in this box. All the quangos together, you might take that up to one of my television 50s. The big money, David, is with Mark Dampier. Tens of billions of pounds on public sector pensions nationwide, hundreds of pounds in this box. But as we've heard tonight, it's easily the most controversial, as he said, what Margaret Thatcher called unfinished business.
OK. Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, yes, what are you going to take back to Westminster as an MP from this debate?
Well, I think what we've got to realise is that we've just simply been living beyond our means, and if we don't sort this situation out, our children and our children's children will be paying for it. The private sector has to pay the taxes to pay for the public services. That private sector has got bigger, the public sector's got bigger than the private sector. We need to reverse that again.
Tessa Munt, what will you take back to Nick Clegg?
The first thing is I think we should actually strip out the pension scheme for MPs. I didn't go into being an MP for having a pension like that. And it's just, we have to set an example in the way that we behave, and I couldn't agree more.
Your take, right, and
yes,
Kerry McCarthy, yes, let's go through the MPs. Kerry McCarthy, what will you take back?
What upsets me a little bit about the polarisation of the debate tonight is that it doesn't really bear much relation to the people that I represent in my constituency. You know, particularly, you're talking about public sector workers. If their pensions were taken away from them, they would be reliant on welfare provision. They would be reliant on social services providing care when they become, old and infirm, and so on. And there seems to be this complete, myth about people who have worked for the public sector, have devoted themselves to public services, are somehow living the life of Riley, and that is just not the case at all. And I think we're going down a very dangerous path if we try to sort of demonise public sector workers and make them bear the brunt of what, as other people have said.
Thank you, gentlemen here. You've had your hand up for a long time. Yes, what would you like to say?
I'm from Unite the Union. I'd just like to propose an alternative. We haven't heard one tonight, but basically we're attacking the wrong people. We're attacking the poor, we're attacking the sick, we're attacking the elderly, we're attacking our children's future education. Why aren't we attacking the bankers with the Robin Hood windfall tax? The big four banks alone have already made 16 billion profit that we bailed them out for? Why aren't they paying back? Why aren't they paying back what we did for them?
Thank you. Our time, sadly, has raced away. In the days and months ahead, our lives will change as the new austerity measures come into effect. Will it herald a new dawn of prosperity? Will the public go along with the plans? We'll be following events closely. Tomorrow morning, there's a chance for you to have your say about spending cuts on your BBC local radio station. Wherever you live, the phone lines will be open from 9 o'clock in the morning to take your calls. Our thanks to our three provocateurs, our audience and our hosts here at Filton College. From all of us here, good night.
An undercover detective on the case of a crime ring next on BBC One with the comedy Underclassmen.
The last night of the proms, live this Saturday from 7:30 on the BBC.
Is Don Draper.